Things didn't go as planned for Kentucky last year, due at least in part to all the injuries. Man, that was tough. But you know what? Now it's time for an overhaul in Lexington.
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Happy Friday. We're your host. That's Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Schade. This episode's brought to you by Mazda. Like college basketball players, Mazda is driven by the details. Highlights make the reel, but the work behind them is what makes it count. Stay tuned for this week's Moving the Game Forward. The all-new Mazda CX-5, more to move, every side of you. Andy, this is what we do this time of year. Lots of transfer portal stuff, lots of draft declarations, lots of I'm staying, lots of I'm leaving, all of that. So that's where we'll go at the end of the show. Lots of player movement and announcements, including JP Estrella going to Michigan to see if he can have an Adai Mara-like leap next year. Before we talk about that, we got to go to Raleigh, North Carolina, where Justin Gainey is working on putting his staff together to then figure out, man, we got to get a lot of guys because a lot of their roster left. Thanks a lot, Will Wade. And then we got to start, though, in Lexington, Kentucky, where a similar thing. It's not as many guys out, at least so far, for Kentucky as NC State. But, Andy, a lot of this Kentucky roster is out the door for one reason or another. We have at least one assistant coach out the door in Alvin Brooks, which is going to bridge together segments 1 and 2. Oh, by the way, what's it going to look like this year for Mark Pope and company in Lexington? You think they can make a big overhaul to get back to what we thought they would be?
Look, I know it's kind of the age where this kind of thing happens every year in the transfer portal NIL era, but like Mark Pope has had to build an entirely new roster basically every single year. And like, I know that continuity is more rare, but like most programs have some. And like, it feels like this Kentucky team is having very, very little. Now they're going to apparently they're going to have some. What we're hearing is that Malachi Moreno and Cam Williams have confirmed that they are returning to Kentucky next year. Malachi Moreno is a huge get for Kentucky to keep heading into his sophomore year. Cam Williams is a very versatile player. Had some injury issues last year and stuff, but I think is a good piece for them to keep. And then you have a couple other guys who are probably going to come back in the sense that they haven't currently entered their name into the transfer portal, but as we're recording this, they still have 13 days to do so. So things could change there, but yeah, it's going to be a very new look team. And again, I think going back to the conversation you and I had on Thursday's show, sometimes these big roster overhauls are because a team wants to keep, a lot of their guys together and is unable to do so because of money. Sometimes they're the catalyst for why there's so many players departing the program. And I think you're probably seeing a little mix of both here. Collin Chandler recently entering the transfer portal is a huge storyline for Kentucky. I think probably the biggest one out of this group in the sense that the most surprising departure and a player that very clearly Mark Pope and the Cats wanted to keep. The report that we heard is that Chandler asked for what would have been the second largest contract that Kentucky has ever given out, which again, it's only been a few years, but still they have paid some big money for some big players. And Kentucky was not willing to pay what he was asking for. And so they effectively let him walk or let him enter the transfer portal. Obviously, if he does not get that money elsewhere, maybe he'll come back. Who knows? But there's already a lot of connections for him to go back towards his home state of Utah. But I do, you look at this team, it's not just him. Mo Dioubate in the portal. Brandon Garrison's in the portal. Jasper Johnson, who's a Kentucky kid, is in the portal. Andrei Yelovich is in the portal. Jalen Lowe is in the transfer portal. We don't expect Jaden Quaintance to be back. He is all but certain to go to the NBA. That was expected before the season, so that's not exactly a shock. But that combined with the graduations of Otega Owe and Denzel Aberdeen, who, by the way, Aberdeen is looking for another year of eligibility, and he actually technically is in the transfer portal, but I'm not really sure what the argument for an additional year is for Aberdeen. I guess we'll see. But either way, he's not coming back to Lexington, it sounds like. So, yeah, this is going to be a brand new look roster. They're connected to some great players, but connected only gets you so far. They got to actually land a couple of these guys. And what I'm looking for more than anything else is whether Mark Pope will return to building a roster around his strengths as a coach, which doesn't feel like what we've seen them do. They spent $20+ million last year to kind of just bring in the best players they could. And the roster construction always on paper looked suspect and played out, again, in part due to injuries, like you said, but played out really poorly throughout the year. So I'm curious if we will see them go after guys that seem to more capably fit what he does as a coach, as opposed to just going after the guys ranked the highest by 247 Sports or Evan Mia or other places like that.
Andy, do you think we'd be having this same conversation? And look, I know ifs are ifs and whatever, but let's say that Jalen Lowe and Jaden Quaintance are healthy last year. Would we be at this much movement for Kentucky?
Probably not quite. I think Lowe would have been a pretty good fit had he been healthy, because even when he played, like, he never played super well because he was never healthy. Like, even when he played, he wasn't healthy.
Yeah.
I think it erases a lot of their issues, but I also wonder, like, if Quaintance had been healthy all year, for example, Moreno might have played less. He might actually be in the transfer portal. So it almost could have had an adverse effect. I would have thought that Jasper Johnson might have stuck around because he did play a fair amount because of the Low injury. So I don't know. They would have been better. And if they had been better and won more games, I think we probably wouldn't see quite as many departures. It sounds like there was some behind the scenes stuff that some players weren't happy about. It's impossible to know whether these injuries impacted that or not. But yeah, it's hard to imagine it would be this much of an overhaul had those guys been healthy.
So yeah, that's such a good point about Malachi Moreno. I completely agree. Man, and what I thought he just did so much more than expected. Like I thought he would be great. Andy, how hilarious would it be if Collin Chandler and Rob Wright just passed like ships in the night trading? It's like
sort of seems like that's a pretty distinct possibility, more so on the Chandler end of things than Wright. But if Wright's looking for a big payday, Kentucky's got it.
That's exactly why I bring it up. It just, maybe more so in the Calipari era, but it feels like Rob Wright just would have wound up would have gone to Kentucky. And so going to be interesting to see with that. I fully expect to see Kentucky make some big splashes, but at the same time, as you said, there's this world where it's like they don't end up just going after splashy big names, right? And so because I say that because I could see a world in where Mark Pope does exactly what you just said and starts to go after and target players who are just Mark Pope style, whether that's get a bunch of shooters. Definitely going to get more depth at the point guard position. I'll tell you that right now. But guys that might not be as splashy names initially, similar to Mark Pope himself getting this job, but are guys who, if Pope, as you so well said, gets his type of guys, could ultimately end up being better hits for what the Wildcats are trying to do.
Yeah, I think I'm hopeful that that's what they do, because I followed Mark Pope a lot when he was at BYU. They were in the WCC with Gonzaga a lot of that time, and the play style is it's not only true, and people in Lexington listening may disagree or scoff, but Mark Pope was a darn good X's and O's basketball coach. His in-game coaching was really good at BYU when he had a system that played into his strengths and when he was building a roster. And obviously, yes, I think most coaches are better when they have rosters for 2, 3, 4 years that have a lot of continuity. I think all coaches are struggling with that lack of continuity, some less than others. Dusty May is not seeming to struggle with it. Obviously, many other coaches are not, some are.
Purdue.
And right. And with Pope, I think, to me, it just feels like he realized he had the opportunity to buy the most expensive roster in the country and kind of fell into that a little bit more than he should have. And I look at this list, and we got a list here from the folks at KSR of some of the targets that Kentucky is pursuing. And first of all, you're alluded to, they're going after more guards. Yeah. The list that I put down here has 9 guards on it, 1 wing, and a couple of bigs. That is, and obviously with Malachi Moreno returning, they are one of the very few teams in the country that is not in the market for a true 5 the same way that a lot of other teams are. And that helps them with their flexibility. I mean, the bigs that are on this list are all 4s. They're not centers, and they're not in the Flory Badunga and Santos Cyril and that kind of market as much, which again is going to save them some cash, because those are dudes that are going to be real expensive out on the open market. But you look at some of these guards, and I'm not going to name all of them, but a lot of them I think really do fit what you want for a Mark Pope type team. Finley Bijak from Butler, he's a good shooter, a good floor spacer, tough dude. Like he kind of fits a lot. Rob Wright, I mean, we mentioned him already, 41% last year on a pretty decent volume from three. Like he is that guy for them. Didon Thomas is a very good shooter and a very just gifted scorer with the ball in his hands. Devin Vanderpool at Florida Atlantic, like those guys I think all fit. And then you see their first actual visit is Zoom Diallo from Washington. And Zoom Diallo is a very good scorer. He averaged 16 points per game last year in the Big Ten, but he is not a shooter. Like he's flat out not a shooter at all. And he was like 32%, I think, last year, if even that high. And like 10 2-point attempts per game and less than 2 3-point attempts per game. Like my man is not a 3-point specialist. And while you don't need every player on your team to be a 3-point shooter, I'm curious why they're really, again, knowing that Zoom's a good player, I'm curious why that seems to be their biggest priority right now, because he doesn't really feel like a Mark Pope player. And I wouldn't necessarily be my top choice. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's I'm trying to think back. I guess it would have been the year before. I can't remember what year it was, if Mark Pope was there or if it was still Coach Cal, but like go get a Kobe Brea. And I know there's might not be a Kobe Brea out there, but it's like that's who they should be targeting for that. Like Kobe Brea would just scream Mark Pope to me. And so again, you got to have a Kobe Brea out there, but like that's the kind of guy I'm looking for. So Andy, it's gonna be really interesting to see as the spring wears on and fades into the dog days of summer, and how this Kentucky roster starts to take shape is gonna be really interesting to track.
Yeah, I will say Tyrone Riley is a guy they're looking at, and they looked at him hard last year before he actually withdrew from the portal and came back to San Francisco for his sophomore year. He's big, 6'6" wing. He shot 40% from three last year. He's a great fit. I hope Tyrone Riley goes to Kentucky because I think that Mark Pope would do awesome things with him, and I think he would be a phenomenal fit. But I don't love Diallo. I don't love Neo Avdilas, who is a good player, but not a 3-point shooter. Like I don't find that fit super appealing. So I'm very intrigued more than anything to see if this is the year that Mark Pope kind of decides to just build a more expensive version of the rosters that worked for him at BYU. And I always make this comparison because they're the two bluegrass state programs, but Pat Kelsey has done that at Louisville. Like he went and said, I know what type of team works for me. I'm just going to get the best versions of those players in the transfer portal. And right now they're going to host Jackson Shellstad on a visit this weekend. By all accounts, as we're recording this, it sounds like that's a very realistic possibility that Shellstad ends up in Louisville. And he's a perfect Pat Kelsey point guard. And I'm like, man, I just wish Pope would do that more than he has, because it doesn't feel like it has worked. And it feels like there's an avenue where it does, and he just hasn't taken that route yet.
Yep. We'll figure it out. By the way, Kobe Brea was his first team. I'm thinking back through it as we talk here. So definitely that's the kind of player. All right, Andy, keep us going.
Well, yeah, speaking of newish coaches, in this case, a much newer coach, Justin Gainey, hard at work building a high-level coaching staff to help him pick up the pieces after Will Wade's surprise departure from NC State. We're going to talk about the assistants he's brought in, how it might help them in the transfer portal recruitment, and more coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, this is Moving the Game Forward by Mazda. For those who know, the score never tells the whole story. And we're going to talk about some more transfer portal movement later in the show, but some non-movement happening at St. Louis. The Billikens committed 9 players who are all returning to Josh Schertz's team. In the NIL and transfer portal era, you are not seeing that happen at a mid-major school. I know St. Louis is a resource-rich mid-major school, but to keep 9 players on this roster together, man, oh man, that's a good sign of things to come for Coach Schertz and this St. Louis team. And there's more to these players than the highlights. Again, that continuity is so big. All the early mornings they put in together, those late night runs, constantly showing up for their squad on and off the court. And the all-new Mazda CX-5, it moves the same way, with more space to connect, a bold new design, and more intuitive technology, so you can stay connected to the road and every position that you play. The all-new Mazda CX-5, more to move every side of you. Today's episode is also brought to you by TurboTax. It's tax time, folks, but for a lot of us, the old way of doing taxes, it's kind of a lot. You're trying to book an appointment that's not always the most convenient. You're sitting in a waiting room with a stack of papers, emailing back and forth, and wondering if they really get your unique situation. But this year, you're getting a major upgrade because Intuit TurboTax now has in-person locations nationwide. You can meet face-to-face with a real tax expert, and your documents get uploaded straight to your TurboTax app right on the spot. And just like that, you're done. Your TurboTax expert works to get you every dollar you deserve while you get real-time notifications as you go about your day. It's the relief of walking in and meeting a real person and walking out knowing your taxes are being handled right. So head to turbotax.com/local to find a store near you and book your appointment. All right, folks, I want to thank all of you for making Locked On College Basketball your first listen or watch of the day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And folks, if you never miss an episode, it is time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, one-on-one messaging with us, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. Go to lockedoncollegebasketball.supercast.com or click the link in the show notes to check it out. Isaac, we're talking NC State, the Wolfpack, who, of course, lost their head coach, Will Wade, somewhat surprisingly, like a thief in the night. He goes back to LSU right before, again, there's not a lot of time between the end of the season and the start of the portal window. So NC State had to work somewhat quickly to get in a coach so that they could attempt to keep some of their roster together, or at least start working on replacing those players. And they get in Justin Gainey, who's the former assistant coach at Tennessee, who had a very glowing recommendation from Rick Barnes. Gainey also obviously played at NC State, so wants to be here, wants to be at this program long term. But they got a lot of work to do because they have pretty much their entire roster to replace at this point, Isaac. And it's going to be a tough road for Gainey and his new look assistant coaching staff.
Yeah. And Andy, it's similar to Kentucky, but more split. There's a lot of Wolfpack players who are just out of eligibility, but they also have some portal guys too. The guys who are out of eligibility, Claudia Copeland, man, what a revelation he was this year. That's just huge loss, big guard. Then Allen Lubin, Darion Williams, all starters, Trey Holloman, and Scotty Dioubate as well. Portaling, though, man, it's some big names here, Andy. Matt Abel, who was a great freshman for the Wolfpack this year. Paul McNeil, the one holdover into the Will Wade era, is gone. Cole Clore, who was class of 26, but was an early enrollee, recovering from an injury. He did enroll back in spring semester, so he is technically portaling. Terrence Arsenault, who would come over from Houston, Alan Breed, and a couple other guys too, Colt Langdon and Jamie Kantunaimi. Andy, I don't know how to say his last name. I'll just go ahead and say that right now. But Andy, that leaves a couple guys. Jerry Dang, as far as we know, still on the roster. Musa Sagina, still on the roster. Micah Wilkins is redshirting and should be back as well. One freshman coming in, Trayvon Carter-Givens. So, Andy, potentially 4 guys in the mix there. Obviously, we'll continue to watch how it goes. But the thing here, when you bring in a new coach in Justin Gainey, we got to be tracking both players and staff. Andy, which one do you want to go to first? The player angle of it or the staff angle of it?
Let's go staff, because I think that impacts the player in a lot of ways. I mean, we know that Gainey has brought in Anthony Goins, who is this was reported on Wednesday by Jeff Goodman. He was an assistant coach at Georgia, and he's going to be their offensive coordinator. They also bring in Alvin Brooks. Alvin Brooks was let go at Kentucky this offseason. He'd been at Kentucky for the last 2 years under Mark Pope. Prior to that, he'd spent nearly a decade at Baylor with Scott Drew, so he has connections to both Kentucky and Baylor, now joining this NC State program. And then you have Matt Driscoll joining the staff as well. He was at Kansas State last year, had been kind of brought in sort of as like not necessarily the coach in waiting, but had been a head coach for a long time, brought in to be the lead assistant to Jerome Tang, took over when Tang was fired, and then now is going to join this NC State club. So where that comes into play is not only is this an experienced coaching staff, guys who've been around a long time, which I think is great for a first-year head coach, but it also means that you have connections at Georgia and connections at Kentucky and potentially Baylor, although Baylor does not have any players who were there when Alvin Brooks was there, and then now at Kansas State and to an extent North Florida, of course Tennessee because of Gainey. And so
because Driscoll was only at K-State 1 year, right?
Right. He was only there for 1 year. So what you have now is a coaching staff that has all of these connections, not just with those current rosters and those current players in the portal, but previous connections that they have made. Like maybe somebody enters the portal who was at a different school, but who had been recruited by Robinson or Goins at Georgia. Like they have all of these different connections that they can now leverage in the transfer portal. And looking at some of the names that we either expect them to go after or that they are connected to, like, yeah, you see that. Like you see Bishop Boswell from Tennessee, for example, who is in the transfer portal, who Gainey recruited and brought to Tennessee in the first place. Would not be a surprise whatsoever to see Bishop Boswell end up at NC State. And he's just one of many examples in that vein.
Yeah, Andy, that makes a ton of sense to me. Also, this just, as you mentioned, Bishop Boswell, I wonder if Gainey and Driscoll developed any sort of relationship as as Tennessee was getting Chaz Lanier from North Florida. Like, I wonder if there was any conversation. Like sometimes that can be like when you get divorced and remarried and things don't go well. But maybe that's part of that. Also, on the Brooks, on Alvin Brooks, Andy, folks may or may not know his dad is also in coaching. He's been Lamar's head coach for a while, and unfortunately, he just got let go too this offseason. So it's tough offseason for the Brooks family. But good to see Alvin Brooks III landing on his feet here. Yeah, that I think the Bishop Boswell move would make a ton of sense for him to wind up coming to Raleigh. Andy, another is that Christian Hammond is in talks with NC State from Santa Clara. It was really good there last year. What's interesting for those who are unaware, Herb Sendek is the head coach at Santa Clara. Herb Sendek used to be the head coach at NC State. Herb Sendek's first point guard when he got to Raleigh, none other than Justin Gainey. Andy, I like, for all of the wildness of the portal, it's so fun for me to like dig into these little connections and be like, oh, that's pretty neat, right? Like that's kind of the fun of it, is trying to piece the puzzle together. But man, that would be a great combination of him, Boswell. There is some Juke Harris conversation. It seems like Michigan, as we record at least, is kind of the front runner there, and there are other schools involved, but we'll see, Andy.
Yeah, what I'll be curious if they can go. I mean, some of the big fish from these schools, like if they can go get a Santos Cyril or Jeremiah Wilkinson, who was a stud at Georgia, even a Jordan Ross, who's maybe not quite on that level, but is certainly a guy that I think would fit at NC State. Or is it a David Castillo from Kansas State or something like that, or Jalen Carey from Tennessee?
Like, never mind.
Yeah. Like
wrong purple.
Wrong purple. There's so many guys from those programs specifically that are already in the portal that these coaches have connections to. And again, there's no shortage of holes on the roster for NC State to fill at this point. I mean, there's no obvious, players who are still on the roster who are must play guys. I mean, dang, if he does end up coming back with 6 points per game last year, like he's not necessarily stepping into a starting role. Like this is a clean slate at this point. And so like Hammond is obviously a player they're pursuing who would be like their lead guy. And he's a tremendous player. But Boswell makes sense. Obviously if they could get Harris, that'd be great. But like so many of these names from these programs, I'm just very intrigued to see how much of these coaching connections on this new staff they can leverage to help build a roster, especially because they're kind of coming in behind the sticks with this staff getting put together as the portal's already open.
Yeah, I mean, we just talked about Kentucky, where Alvin Brooks is leaving. Like, there's a whole bunch of exodus from there. I wonder if any of those guys might decide to come to Raleigh. Would be really interesting to keep our eyes on that. But yeah, and I mean, I think it's tough because even in the portal era, the teams that are winning, as you've kind of said, are the ones that continue to have stability. And so if I'm going back to our first conversation, if I'm Mark Pope, if I'm Justin Gainey, that's another part of what I'm looking at is who was it that was it Virginia you talked about a couple years ago? And I know that doesn't matter now because it's Mark Pope it's Ryan Odeman, but that had a bunch of guys they brought in from the portal that had multiple years of eligibility. And
that's right. Yeah.
I wonder if there's any level of that Gainey is like, hey, look, I'm going to be a first year head coach. I need to find some stability, especially because of what we just went through with Will Wade coming in and leaving and that whole thing. And so that'll just be interesting to watch too, is not only the type of player, the style of player, but guys that might have a little bit of longevity and give us a foundation in his first couple of years will be interesting to watch. Andy, we got a whole bunch of other movement all around the country happening literally as we've been recording. We've been adding guys' names to the list here. But one of the biggest ones we got to talk about, quite literally, man, we're just going segue to segue. Alvin Brooks is leaving Kentucky to NC State. Justin Gainey had JP Estrella at Tennessee. Well, now JP Estrella is leaving Tennessee to go to Michigan. Can he take the same type of leap that Ade Mara had this year? Andy and I'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Indeed. Workplace chaos, your deadlines are stacking up, your inbox is overflowing, but the one position you still need to fill, it's sitting there wide open because you don't have the margin to take care of it. Well, good news. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs, who helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location. So you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. Here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I'm talking to you, companies just like yours are going to make 27 hires on Indeed, according to their worldwide data. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all the boxes. Less stress, less time, more results. When the right person needs to come along and cut through the chaos for you, that's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners of our show are going to get a $75 sponsored job credit to help your job posting get the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. So just go to that website, Indeed.com/podcast right now, and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on Locked On College Basketball. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. All right, Andy, obviously this time of year, it's like a smorgasbord. What do you call it when you eat all the it's like a charcuterie board of movement. We've got commitments. We've got portal. We've got I'm coming back to my school. We've got NBA, all of that. But, Andy, I think the place to start is literally as we started to record, we got two big pieces of commitment news. Miles Byrd from San Diego State is going to Providence. We'll look at that in a second, but we got to start with JP Estrella leaving Tennessee to go to Michigan. How funny that literally yesterday we talked about Michigan. To the winner goes the transfer portal spoils, I think we said. And here we go. JP Estrella, who hasn't made major waves at Tennessee, but this time last year, neither had Ade Mara at UCLA. And boy, what a year did he have. So, Andy, my question to you, can Dusty May and that staff get JP Estrella to have the same kind of leap that we saw from Mara this season?
Yeah, I think so. Like, it'll be different in the sense that Estrella is not 7'3", and so much of what made Mara so great this year was just the sheer size. I mean, I think it's would be disingenuous to not acknowledge that is a major part of his success. It's the fact that he moved as well as he did and used his body and his soft touch as well as he did at his size that made him so incredible. But like, I mean, Danny Wolf was not, I think he's listed at 7 foot, but he wasn't over
That's
7
so
feet
tiny.
tall.
So tiny.
Right. Tiny. Right. But JP Estrella is listed at 6'11". So he's maybe a little bit smaller, but he's 240. Like, he's a big dude. And this year was kind of a breakout for him. His first 2 years at Tennessee was pretty, well, he had 1 year where he played 25 games. His second year only played 3 games. And then this last year, he kind of finally stepped into a bigger role, was in double figures, 10 points, 5 rebounds a game, an efficient scorer around the rim, 60%. I think there is a lot of what he was at Tennessee is not that different from what Ade Mara was at UCLA. And so Dusty May has why I would assume yes, or give him the benefit here, is that the additions that May has made in his front court, he has been so good at identifying players that are going to fit what he wants to do and then tailoring his system around their skill sets to make it work. I mean, they turned Ade Mara into what he was by not only recognizing his strengths and building around them, but also like just having a system already that works so well for somebody like him. I assume we'll see the same from Estrella. Does that mean he's going to be a lottery pick in 2027? Maybe not necessarily, and it's a big but if you can keep Morez Johnson and have Johnson and Estrella together, I mean, that's an incredible front court. And this is a really nice addition for Michigan, and a guy that I think we're going to see take a nice leap for the Wolverines in his, I say senior year, it's likely going to be his redshirt junior year, because I'm assuming he's going to get that third year or that second year back with only 3 games played.
Yeah, because we're not to 5-5 quite yet, Mr.
Not
Patton.
yet.
Yeah, well, look, Estrella is obviously multiple inches shorter than Mara, but only gives up 15 pounds to him. He was
Right.
listed at 240 last year, Mara at 255. By the way, Andy, as I was looking up the Michigan roster, this is pretty cool. You need to do it when you have a second. Google Michigan men's basketball, and Google has all this celebratory overlay stuff it does. It's kind of crazy. I hadn't realized it.
Yeah.
Anyway, go check it out, everybody. It's pretty neat. You got to do it quick though. Andy, Miles Bird, San Diego State commits to Providence. Massive pickup for Brian Hodgson. We knew that he would be committing on Thursday, but I didn't think this is where he'd be committing. This is a great pickup for Brian Hodgson. Nice, good sized guard, great defensive guard that you can kind of rely on. You're probably going to wind up when it's all said and done being a top 20, 25 portal top guy this offseason.
Yeah, I think so. He's not a great shooter, but he's a really good defensive player, veteran guy. I think this is a great fit at Providence with what we expect Hodgins to kind of do if he's bringing over his style from South Florida. This is a fun fit. I was, a little surprised considering the other list that were on Bird's kind of top 5 or so that we saw before he committed. But you got to make a big splash when you're a new head coach at a Power 5 school. And so for Hodgson to go get one of the bigger names in the portal is him doing exactly that. And we'll see if it kind of brings some more quality talent over to Providence for them this upcoming season.
Man, going to be really interesting. All right, Andy, some other portal names. David Punch from TCU, Pop Isaacs, Texas A&M, Simeon Wilcher from Texas, Kennard Davis, another BYU guy. Literally, as we've been recording, one of the names we've added is Travis Perry from Ole Miss. We've got a few others as well in terms of some returners. JoJo Tugler is going to be back at Houston. That's great for Kelvin Sampson. Maybe next year he'll take the offensive jump we thought he would take this year. Sean Stewart, who was originally at Duke. Did he go anywhere in between? Is returning to Oregon.
He went to Ohio State, yeah.
That's it, yes. I can't ever – that whole front court between Sean Stewart and Bradshaw is like, whatever. Draft declarations. While Houston's going to get Tugler back, they will not get Chris Senack. Obviously, he's off to the draft as we expected, as is Ibuka Okore. And so, Andy, out of that, anything massive that jumps out of you? Anything surprising? Where are you at with it?
David Punch is going to make somebody very happy. He's a really good player, and TCU didn't get a ton of attention this past year, but he is very talented. That's the main one that stands out to me. I'm also going to be curious if Travis Perry goes back to Kentucky, although I doubt it. We didn't really think that he was I was surprised another SEC school picked up Travis Perry after his freshman year at Kentucky, and he didn't really do a whole lot to prove that he belonged in the SEC at Ole Miss. So I'll be interested to see where he ends up. Those are kind of the two things that stand out to me. We'll see if Moo Davis, where he ends up after a tumultuous year at BYU this past season.
Yeah, dude. That's good. Yeah, David Punch is not only going to make a team very happy, he's also going to make himself a lot of money wherever it is that he goes, Andy. All right, look, here's the deal, guys. We're going to be doing a lot of this because we want to keep you up to date because I know it's overwhelming, just the sheer amount of names and everything that's going on. But Andy and I, we got you covered all offseason long. Don't miss out. We also got our way too early top 25s coming at you. We're thinking Monday, but who knows? Because there's probably going to be big portal news over the weekend, so we'll see what we do.
Yeah, we'll see. But either way, way too early top 25s, fun, not super serious, but very fun. Looking forward to doing that. Isaac, that is going to wrap it up for us today and for this week, the last week of the season where we actually had a game to recap as we did that on Tuesday, of course. So very sad to be fully transitioning into off-season mode, but of course excited that we still got plenty of news and coverage here with the transfer portal, with recruiting, with NBA draft declarations, coaching carousel still swinging along, tons of stuff coming your way 5 days a week from here on out this offseason. Stick with us. As always, though, we do want to say apologies to the lawyer and apologies to the Sanford family. Let's go Wild Popes, since we talked about them a lot today. Cheers to the Mick Bruins. Have a fantastic weekend, folks. And until next time, peace out.